Welcome to the Wine Centric show where we talk to the titans of the industry. And boy, do I have a titan here today in stature and in prowess. This man is a former #1 NFL draft pick in 1993. He is a now winemaker of some of the greatest wines in Washington State. He is none other than Mr. Drew Bledsoe. Welcome, Drew.
I love that, dude. I'm gonna go with Titan from now on. I'm gonna change my bio. Just Titan of the world.
You could put it on a business card. You should put it on a label. I highly recommend using it, and I haven't patented it or anything, so go for it.
I'll footnote you. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
For citations and how I became a Titan, I'll just say Matt said it. So then we'll go with that.
I am accredited, so there you go.
I love it,
Drew. I'm sure we could talk about cliches and football and all that, and we are going to get into that, trust me, because I love the whole perspective on athletes making wine and that stuff. And your playing career was wildly interesting, but this is the Wine-Centric show, so everything is centered around wine. So let's start there. Okay. You are the owner, proprietor of Doubleback Winery, of Bledsoe Family Winery, and Bledsoe McDaniels Winery. So 3 different wineries. Let's just talk about your wine journey first. I think the story goes back to your playing career. You were inviting teammates over to drink wine. Was there any standout wines that made you go, oh?
It's actually kind of a cool story. So we got into the league. Started drinking wine because we were supposed to. We were supposed to act like grown-ups, go to dinner and you can't, go to a nice steakhouse and order, a Coors Light. But then very quickly, discovered, wow, this is way more interesting than what we were drinking before. And so we started collecting wines, different wines from different areas. And like most people, particularly of my age and that generation, red wine in America was Napa. And so we were buying a lot of Napa wine. And then eventually discovered that we liked stuff in Walla Walla better, but we can get back to that in a bit. The reason that one wine is a cool story, the one that really stood me on my head and really kind of changed things for me, was a 1998 Viader from Napa. Delia Viader, but Tony Soter was the winemaker. And then Tony Soter, eventually, I think it was very soon after he made that wine, moved to the Willamette Valley and started making Pinot Noir and opened, Soter Winery, which is one of our favorites. But I got to go to dinner with Tony, just probably three years ago, maybe. And I'm recounting this story to him. Hey, the one wine, that a wine epiphany that we all have, was a wine you made. It was a 1998 Viader. And he started to get tears in his eyes because he goes, that was the first year that we got to integrate the hillside fruit that I planted for Delia. And it was the last wine I ever made for her. And it was the best wine I ever made when I was in the Napa Valley. You're in this journey, you get down this rabbit hole with wine, and there's a lot of, dorkiness and so on that goes with some of it or whatever. But then you see one of these iconic winemakers, and he has, a wine that he made and that was really important to him. Like it really mattered because it was sort of the realization of this vision he had with this hillside fruit for Viader. And, so it was a cool story. I was just telling him, hey man, I like the wine you made. And all of a sudden discovered that particular wine was really important to him.
That gave me chills just listening to you recount that, because there was something in you where his passion in that resonated and it translated. I mean, it literally transported you. That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. 1998 Viader, made by Tony Soter. Go see if you can find it out there. Maybe you can have the same experiences, Drew. So I have to challenge you on one thing because you said, oh, people aren't going into restaurants and ordering Coors Light. There's no way Brett Favre, who you played against in the Super Bowl, was going into steakhouses and ordering Napa cabs or Burgundy and stuff. He was ordering Coors Light or, dare I say, Mickey's.
Yeah, he probably was, and shots and whatever else he could find. Yeah, but that's Wisconsin. It's a little bit different. I don't. Man, pretty sure Brett. He could act properly if he needed to in the right setting. He would just be guzzling the wine, not something else.
Sure, yeah. It's hard to guzzle 14 to 15% Cabernet, but yeah, he could probably figure it out. So, okay, that's really cool. And I was thinking, when I was a kid growing up watching sports, and like my first entree into professional sports, I was lucky to watch the 86 Giants. And the 86 Mets. That was like my first, when I really started paying attention. By the way, we're going to have to get a Coach Parcells story from you later. But I always had the impression that athletes didn't drink during the season. Come to find out, that's very different. Talk to me about how that became okay and like the relationship in season with wine.
Yeah, well, I think we were probably more buttoned up than the previous generation. I think they're probably more buttoned up now than we were then. If we were going to go out, we would go out generally on Monday night, and then Tuesday was our day off. So that was sort of our weekend, right? If we we're going to go more than just wine with dinner. But then, if we went out to dinner on a Thursday, we weren't getting hammered, but we'd have wine with dinner. We weren't drinking and getting drunk. We'd have wine with dinner most nights, and
that was totally cool amongst the league.
Yeah, the league, there were no rules with the league, unless you had a problem, then your team would intervene. But no, there were no rules on that front. There are legendary stories of guys going pretty deep on Thursday and Friday nights.
Nice. Yeah, when Channing Frye, former NBA champion, was on the show, who does Chosen Family Wines, not too far from where you're doing your Oregon project, he was saying that he really was indoctrinated into the world of wine by Coach Popovich. Was there somebody in the NFL that was like that? That was like, oh, I mean, I know you said like, oh, well, we're supposed to act like grown-ups, but was there like a Pied Piper of like, try this wine?
Well, we were sort of getting into it around the same time. There were quite a few of us on the team, but Damon Heward and when he signed with us in New England, he was really like a fellow wine geek. And
he played in Washington. He's from Washington also, right?
Yeah, he went to the University of Washington. We played together just for 1 year with the Patriots. And then he and Marino went on to, they ended up starting Passing Time up here in Washington. They're making some killer wine too, almost as good as ours, but not quite. That competitive thing never really leaves. But they are making really serious wine. They're doing a great job. But when we first set out to look into doing this, there were going to be 4 quarterbacks. We were all going to go into it together. It was me and Damon, Dan Marino, and then Rick Meyer. My buddy, we were drafted the same year. We were the top 2 draft picks in '93, and we've been great friends ever since then. Well, then Rick went on to start, actually acquired a winery called Mirror, which is sort of a play on his last name, but it has deeper meaning than that, in the Napa Valley, and making some kick-ass wine in Napa. So if you have to drink Napa, I recommend Mirror.
Yeah. Another Notre Dame quarterback there.
We were going to go into business together. And then it turns out, you have 4 Chiefs and no Indians. That doesn't work very well. Quarterbacks.
No, it really doesn't.
Notoriously, quarterbacks, there's only one on the field at a time, and we're kind of used to being that guy. So we each have our own businesses.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how competitive does it get in the wine business? Like, yes. So first of all, I mean, it's a rising tides lift all boats kind of scenario. I know, that's how Napa Valley became what the Napa Valley is because they really leaned into each other's wines and supported each other's back in the late 60s and early 70s when Napa was starting to make good world-class wines. but you're a competitor by nature. You competed at the highest level of athletics. How much do you, and be honest, how much do you think about like, oh man, my partners over here, they got 95 points and I got 93 or something? Like, does that enter into it?
Yeah, I don't know, the scores. The scores are the scores. Those are the critics. They've been really good to us, obviously. But sometimes, you just realize that's a subjective thing where they're tasting 300 wines in a day. So we don't get too tied up in that. But I will tell you that the great thing and the difference is, now, with other athletes coming into the wine world, and one thing that I'm really happy with is that there are a lot more athletes coming into the wine world that are really serious about making great wine. I feel like in the 90s, early 2000s, there were quite a few, athlete wines out there, but not very many of them were actually serious projects. A lot more sort of endorsement deals. Like, hey, you can use my name, put it on some cheap, shitty bottle of wine, and we'll sell some juice.
It's more.
But now you see, like Channing, you see Sidney Rice. Obviously the quarterbacks that I mentioned earlier are making serious wine. I haven't tried Dwayne Wade's wine, but I know he's making serious juice down there. So a lot of the athletes that are getting into. Actually, I had some of Annika's wine, Sorenstam recently. Danica Patrick is making wine, and she's making real juice. So I mean, there are a lot of athletes now that are getting into it that are actually really serious about trying to make excellent wine, make real wine, and we are very supportive of each other. We really truly are. You said the rising tide, and that's really true. And then within our community in the Walla Walla Valley and Washington in general, we're still the little brother, to California, and so there's sort of a collective competition with all of us to try to rise up. So there's a lot of open sharing of information, really trying to help other people be successful. And then within that, we're trying to be the best. So we share all the information. Like, here, we'll give you the playbook, but we're still going to kick your ass with the same playbook. So but it's a different kind of competition. In the NFL, you want the other guy to lose, and you want him to lose as bad as possible. Especially if it's the Jets, you want him to lose really bad and never win a game again. But in the wine world, my quote unquote competitor doesn't have to lose in order for me to win. As a matter of fact, it's better for me if they do well, for my business. So it's kind of cool in that way, Matt, where it's like, okay, yeah, we want to lift each other up and support each other.
And it's that competition that's driving you. Like, oh, he made a really good wine. I want to do that and make it my own spin on it. Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say, and you might disagree or agree with this, but I think former Met Tom Seaver probably led the way for making real juice. May he rest in peace in California. Like, he wasn't out in front, like publicly putting his name on it. He was just making really good wine out of California. So I think he kind of laid the groundwork for that.
Totally agree. He was probably the first one to actually do it in the real way. And he was, famously, he was out on his tractor, like he was out there, he was doing it,
Totally.
Yeah, he was, I think, I could be totally wrong on this, but I think he was probably the first one that really broke that mold, as a Hall of Fame baseball player that then goes into the wine world, but doesn't just slap his name on a bottle, actually own property and made very real wine. But he was one of one, I think, for quite a while in terms of approaching it that way.
Yeah, really being into it. All right. Let's get into your wines. Let's talk about it. And let me preface this by saying this is a celebration of Washington State wine. I have my little trusty, thank you, Eileen Sevier, who helped set this interview up, this Washington State handy wine book. But for those of you listening and you're thinking, I like California wines, I like Napa Valley. Let me just tell you, and Drew, you know this already, but Washington State, and especially the Eastern Washington, on the other side of the Cascades from Seattle, it is a geological dynamo. You had these unbelievable Missoula floods come through over 15,000 years ago and just rocked this area geologically that was already, based on volcanic soils. then you take on top of that it is like basically a desert. The average rainfall is 7 inches per year. And you just have this, but you're close to Mount Rainier. You have unbelievable weather, and it's just, it's amazing place to grow fruits, vegetables, and wine grapes. So you doubled down on Doubleback. To speak further to not just being an athlete to slap a name on the label, not just only did you not buy it, an existing vineyard, you decided to plant a vineyard.
Yeah, it was when we decided to do this. I wanted to do it in the most real way. I wanted to start with just a piece of dirt, and plant a vineyard, and we helped do that. My wife and our 4 kids actually got out and put vines in the ground with our own hands. We had real pros that were doing most of the planting, but I think there were like 4 rows that we put in the ground with our own hands, and really wanted to see if we could bring something out of the ground and make really world-class wine. And we have, it was just really cool for me. And, you start to talk about the geology, of where I grew up. I tell people now, if I'd known I was going to be a geology nerd in my professional life, I would have paid a little more attention in geology 101 in college. That was the class we all called rocks for jocks, because the geology professor was a football fan. If you showed up, then you get an easy A. But now I'm like, everywhere I'm driving, my wife, she just laughs at me because we'll be driving around, and I'll start looking at rock formations as we're driving by, and I'm like, wow, man, how all of a sudden it's tilted that way? How did it get like that? But yeah, the geology of our region is actually, it's pretty amazing. Honestly, largest lava flows they've ever discovered evidence of in the history of the world happened in the northwestern United States, starting like British Columbia, Montana, all down across Idaho, parts of Utah, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and all the way out into the Pacific Ocean, where this lava's in places miles thick, going back a few billion years. And then you reference the Missoula floods. One of our geology buddies at Whitman College in Walla Walla, his quote is, he says, if you're a geologist and you're a good geologist and you get to go to heaven, the first thing you ask God for is to rewind the tape and watch the Missoula floods. He goes, it's like geology porn. And so you see, because these floods were just biblical in nature, just these massive cataclysmic floods that came across the entire Northwest. And all of that comes together, to create, well, actually both the Walla Walla Valley and the Willamette Valley of Oregon were formed by the same geology. The big difference, as you said earlier, at our vineyard in the Willamette Valley, we'll get on average 44 inches of rain. And in Walla Walla, I think at McQueen Vineyard, it's actually less than the average. It's like 4 to 6 inches of rain annually, and it falls in the wintertime. So you have, this geology that underlies these two amazing wine grape growing regions, and then just radically different weather, where we're a desert, where we get these really, really long, hot summer days, still get big diurnal swings where it cools off, 40 and 50 degrees from the hottest part of the day to the coolest part of the night.
Grapes love that because it helps them really develop.
Absolutely. You get longer hang time, maintain good natural acid in the wine. You're able to hang longer on the vine, develop complexity. And then within our Walla Walla Valley, we have 5 different vineyards, and each of those vineyards within the valley, even though they're very close to each other, they're really radically different from each other. McQueen Vineyard, which was our original estate vineyard, that's up on top of this hillside. The vines go right into this volcanic basalt. It's really windy, high stress, low vigor. It's a really hard place for things to grow, and that really forms the backbone of Doubleback Cabernet. That's the structure. That's the power in the wine. But then you go to the bottom of the hill into the Rocks District, which was made famous by Cayuse with their Syrah, but it's a fantastic place for going Bordeaux varietals also. But it's only about a mile and a half away, but it's in like the rolled river rocks. It looks like the Rhone Valley. So those retain heat, extend your growing day, and those wines are just voluptuous, pretty, red fruit, really full. And so that's kind of the yin and the yang of those 2 vineyards. And then we have 3 other vineyards that fill out the rest of it. But it's a really fascinating place. for grapes to grow because it's not homogenous. It's
Yeah.
like the wines from the different parts of the valley are really unique.
Damn, Drew, you are not just a jock for rocks. You're really like a rock jock, rock jock nerd.
Yeah.
Hey, one of the things you said about Doubleback and where it's uniquely situated made me think about why did you separate the wineries of Doubleback and Bledsoe Winery? Because I don't know, I think most wineries would have just had one label and then you could have identified single vineyards. What was the thinking behind that?
One of the advantages that we've had in this business is that we really are our own target demographic. We still buy and collect wines. And to me, one label with, and maybe I'm just not smart enough to track all of this in my head, but one label where it's the same label, but then there's a lot of different individual vineyards. It's hard for me to keep track. So we wanted each of the wines to have their own distinct identity and their own reason for being. Doubleback is a state-grown, very best Cabernet that we can make every single year from the Walla Walla Valley, and that's simple. That's what that is. That's what it'll always be. What has been from the inception. Bledsoe family winery, more accessible. Price points are a little bit lower. We were just number 17 in the world in Spectator with our Bledsoe family cab. And the biggest reason for that is that we were their highest rated Cabernet under $90 in the United States, and it's priced at $50. And so the idea there is we can over deliver at that price point and make the wine accessible for more people. We can also play around a little bit. We got some Syrah, some Rosé, some Chardonnay, and then we do some fun club wines with, these one-offs with Cab Franc and Merlot and Malbec and Viognier. And, just there's some really fun stuff that we do under that label.
Is the Viognier only club only?
Yeah, it's club only. Yes, exactly. Okay,
I'm going to need some of that, Drew.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
By the way, this is a good moment. I just need to pause because I think you're drinking coffee right now. Yeah. I know it's like early. Good. I'm going to send you some coffee. I make some coffee. We'll put it up there on the screen with a local roastery called Carborough Coffee. I make with them the Tastemaker series. It's a Pacamara blend. So it's like, imagine a single vineyard, single varietal coffee. And I'm going to send you some. And maybe you'll send me some Viognier in trade. But we'll
trade. Done deal.
All right, done. I love it.
And then the third winery, which is more recent, Bledsoe McDaniels. That's focused on Willamette Valley Pinot Noir with an estate vineyard that we own down there, and then we still buy some fruit down there. And that one, Josh McDaniels, our winemaker, and for those football guys out there, football people out there, that's not the same Josh McDaniels that's the football coach. It's different. I like to point out that our Josh has not been fired multiple times. The other Josh has.
Or left your job after being hired by the first day.
Yeah, exactly. But
shots fired.
Our Josh, it's been our winemaker for over a decade now, and I really felt like his name deserved to be on the front of the bottle, not just the back of the bottle. And so we decided to name that one Bledsoe McDaniels out of respect for him. But we wanted these wineries to each have their own distinct identity. And I don't know if our mission was to make it not confusing. Sometimes I think maybe we made it more confusing. But the goal was for each of these to have their own identity.
Well, you made your marketing team work harder. I can tell you that.
Exactly.
Having a wife who's in marketing, but they like that. They need the challenge. What do they do anyway? Okay, I understand the change for Bledsoe McDaniels because that's a different state. It's a different varietal that you're focusing on, so that makes sense. I also question about Josh McDaniels. He is a really highly regarded winemaker. He made wine for Figgins, who Figgins was birthed out of Leonetti, which we're talking about like the flagship wineries that really put Washington State on the map. Was there any point in the interview process with Josh that you just might have suggested, dude, do you mind changing your name?
Yeah. It's been funny for him. Because, people go to Twitter or X or whatever and they send him stuff. But he gets two things. First of all, he never ever has gotten a football tweet that said, "Good job, nice win." It's always critical. It's always, what the hell were you thinking? We're down, you're, or when Josh agreed to take the Colts job and then left him at the altar, like, hey, if I ever see you on the streets of Indianapolis, I'm going to kill you, and so he gets criticism and hate. And then the other thing he gets, people send videos of their son playing high school football saying, hey, I think my son could play for the Raiders. I think my son could play for the Patriots. And so he'll respond to him and say, hey man, I'm just a winemaker. Your kid looks like a good player, but I can't really help you here.
No, I mean, that's how Josh should respond back, right? It'd be like, oh yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Is he a hard worker? Does he want to be a cellar rat? Because we've got interns.
that's right.
But no, it's been funny for him. He did get to meet the two Joshes. Got to meet. We went back for a Patriots game when Josh was coordinator for the Patriots last time, and we went in the locker room after the game. And our Josh said, he goes, man, it was great for me to have the other Josh there because he was the only one I was bigger than in the entire locker room. He goes, it's a very emasculating place to be with all these giant, super athletic humans. And then the other Josh McDaniels is a few inches shorter than our Josh. But what I want to do, and I've pitched this a few times, I just can't get anybody to take it up. I think it would be good television, would be to do like a job shadow with the two Joshes. And film it. The winemaker gets to go follow the football coach for 2 days, and then the football coach gets to come follow the winemaker for a couple days, and then distill that down to. I think it'd be pretty fun television, right? You get to see these two different worlds through the eyes of guys that are mutually fans of each other.
I think that'd be fantastic. I have the perfect videographer. If you want to produce it and give me the access, I'm ready.
Yeah,
let's go.
Yeah, that'd be super fun. I think we could probably get at. I think the problem was the first time I pitched it was when Belichick was still there, and he didn't want any cameras anywhere around him. But Vrabel, I think would be more open to something like that, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah, he'd be up for it. Okay, you brought it up. I tried to stay back for as long as I could. Let's just talk football. Indulge me for a moment, okay? All right. First of all, your dad was a Husky. How do you choose Washington State Cougars?
Yeah, my old man played offensive tackle for the Huskies back in the '60s. He was captain of the Husky football team back in the day. When I was being recruited, he really wanted that to be my thing. He's like, look, you don't have to go follow in my footsteps because I wore those colors. And then, I think we all just really fell in love with Mike Price, who was the head coach at Washington State. He came in and sat down at our table, and my mom didn't advise directly on any of those decisions, but we can all tell when our mom likes somebody. And I could tell that my mom really liked Mike Price and trusted him without her ever having to actually say it out loud. And so it was really that simple. The trips I took, it was Washington State. I went to Stanford. I always like to point out that I did get into Stanford for those that give me shit for going to Wazoo.
Congratulations.
And then I took a trip to Miami because Dennis Erickson was down there. He knew who I was. I knew I wasn't going there, but I wasn't turning down a trip to South Beach from Walla Walla in January when I was a senior in high school. But
you are smart.
But just absolutely loved Wazoo, loved everything about it, and most importantly, met my wife there. And many years later, we're still going strong.
Yeah, and you did well by them. So okay, that makes sense. It wasn't like screw you, Dad, I'm going to the competitor. It was well supported by the family.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And your dad, by the way, not only do you guys make great wine and are helping to amplify the message for Washington State wines, but your father or your grandfather was a state senator for Washington State. Is that right?
He was.
Or somewhat big in politics.
And then he was, and then was the head of the Department of Fish and Game. He was the director of agriculture. So yeah, he was after being a World War II pilot, came back, started a cattle ranch, and then rose to the ranks in politics. So I felt kind of bad for my dad for a long time, and being in Eastern Washington. Forever, he was Stu Bledsoe's son. So Stu, like a big name, particularly in Eastern Washington. And then about the time that was fading, then I, rose up to Wazoo. So then he was my dad. So he was either Stu Bledsoe's son or Drew Bledsoe's dad, both of which I think he was proud of.
Sure.
I don't think there was a long period of time where he just got to be Mac Bledsoe and be a big deal on his own.
He's a big deal on the Wine Centric show.
Yeah,
And what I was going to say about that is also Josh McDaniels, the winemaking Josh McDaniels. His dad was mayor of Walla Walla.
that I don't know that if that's true, I'm going to be pissed at Josh that I don't know. I won't,
Well,
but maybe he was. I don't know.
a tidbit about him that you didn't know. Okay, so I just have to say, and I know you've heard this a million times, and you've said this 1,000 times, but like, I just think about the day when you got injured, September 23rd, 2001. And if you look at it in a vacuum, obviously it's life changing for your life, and for many great reasons as well. But also, like, you can't look at that day in a vacuum because that's what, like, not long after 9/11, like less than 2 weeks after 9/11, you think about what was going on in the world that in that time. What a mind bender that must have been for you in general. And I don't bring that up to talk gossip or to talk, trash. Although I do think you slowed down before Mo Lewis hit you, by the way.
Well, I mean, shoot, there was a train coming down the tracks. You're not gonna run into it as fast as you can. But I was going out of bounds. It was third down, and I saw him coming. Well, I knew if I just kept going straight, I was going to be short of the first down. So I was actually kind of trying to stop and let him go by so that I could lean back in and get the first down. And unfortunately, it didn't work out very well. And running headlong, ended up getting hit in the ribs by the train.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't work out very well. But went back in the game though. A lot of people, don't remember that I actually went back into that game before we figured out that I was dying. And so yeah, survived it. I survived it. Spent 5 days in the hospital with a tube in my chest, and I'm just glad that our training staff and doctors recognized that there was something that was really wrong, because I was trying to go home. I got home, I would have gone to bed and not gotten up.
Yeah. You've told the story a lot, and thank you for sharing again, because I know it's like, well, maybe at some point you're numb to it at this point, but for those that are listening and they're just wine fans, they're like, what are they talking about? Well, Drew got injured, and it could have been life threatening. Like you said, he spent 5 days in the hospital for internal bleeding, but thankfully came out the other end of it. And this is the part I really want to get to. And I don't want to talk about a gossip, but I just mean like as a point of reference for people, like the way you handled yourself, the humility and grace, because Tom Brady came on to be Tom Brady, and you still had a magical run in that time. But like, he took your job. He Wally pipped you, or he Lou Gehrig'd you. And you went on to be successful after that. But like, I know that's not easy. No human being could just stand up and go through that. And I'm sure, and I know, like, there's some interviews where you got a little snarky, but you still handled yourself well. How do you get through that? Like, what's the lesson learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple points, Matt. We at first and at the highest level, we all have decisions to make. Bad things happen to everybody. And we all have decisions. All right, well, how am I going to handle this? Right? Am I going to make it about me? Or in this instance, like when you're part of a team, it's the team first. That's what matters. And that's an easy thing to say when things are going well. It's a much harder thing to actually put into practice when things aren't going your way. But I had made that commitment and to be part of a team, and so to support the team in whatever way I could. And so that's what you do. The other thing I always point out to people also, I've always had a problem with professional athletes that talk about not being treated fairly. Like, wait a second, you're getting paid to play a game, all right? Life has been good to you. You've realized everybody's childhood dream. You get to be paid to play a game. And so, I really, in spite of, personal feelings about whatever it was, for me to say, hey, life's not been fair to me, that's bullshit. I got to be an NFL quarterback. That's what we all pretended to be when we were at recess in grade school, right? Life's been pretty damn good to me. So for me to take a situation and say, hey, this is totally unfair, that's kind of, it's disrespectful to the rest of the world, to talk about how my life's been unfair. And, so, and I always had that perspective going in that, how cool is this? I get to do this. And so, at the end of the day, it's kind of cool because, because of the way that went down afterwards and the way that I handled it. And I wrote him a nice thank you note took out an ad in all three of the local papers and left a thank you note to the Boston fans. And now when I go back there, still completely embraced by that whole community. Had I taken the selfish approach, probably wouldn't be welcome back there with open arms the way I am. So it all worked out. But ultimately it's just like, hey, look, what's the right thing to do in this situation? The right thing to do was to step up and be supportive.
Well, I can just say that Mac and Mama Bledsoe would be truly happy about that and the grace that you handled that situation with. Let's transition back into wine. And with that great thing you talked about being a team, did I read that you are now having a full-time harvest team?
Yeah.
For your wine?
So the word sustainability gets greenwashed in the world right now. Sometimes, it's an important word and we all recognize that, but sometimes it's marketing bullshit. But for us, it has a pretty deep meaning. First of all, around the environmental piece, we've always been very responsible with how we do things. Our vineyards have their own ecosystems. We have a lot of biodiversity. We try to create, a truly natural environment around all of the vineyards. Specific cover crops, we don't mow as much, so we cut down on diesel usage and water, and that piece to us has always been kind of the obvious piece. Look, if you're producing something that comes from the land, you should take care of the land. To me, that's just common sense, right? But in 2019, we started our own farming company. When you think about farm workers, particularly in northern latitudes, you're generally talking about contracted seasonal labor. You're talking about people that work for you for, 7-8 months, and then they have to figure out how to feed their family in the wintertime, whether that's going on welfare, whether that's going south, whatever that is. So we made a commitment when we started our farm company that, first of all, they were going to be at least among the highest paid in the Northwest, if not the highest. I don't know where we rank, but I know we pay them very well. They have retirement benefits. Our farm workers have health benefits, so they don't have to worry about what happens if their kid gets sick. But most importantly, they have stability in their lives. They don't have to worry about where their next paycheck is coming from. For the first time really in their modern family history, they have like a consistent paycheck coming in all year round. So the kids can go to one school, they can stay there. And, so it's a feel good for us, even though it doesn't look, initially on a profit and loss statement, it's like, well, this is more expensive to do it this way. But the cool piece, and this is really the epiphany, for me as a business owner, is that that's ended up being really good business. These people, and by the way, they work their tails off all year round. We're bottling. Sure. We're bottling right now. They're packing boxes. In the wintertime, they're helping with shipping. They're amazing, amazing people. But also, they now treat our vineyards as if they own them. They talk about our vineyard, not the boss's vineyard, right? They're not showing up and working at a vineyard to collect a paycheck. These are vineyards now. We're 6 years in now. These are vineyards that these people know more intimately than anybody else in the world. And they really treat those vines as if they own them. And they also then have very specific knowledge when it comes to, pruning, when it comes to canopy management. They really intimately know what these vines need and like. And because of that, we've seen across the board our fruit quality continue to go up. And so taking care of the vineyards, taking care of those people, all of a sudden, everything that's in our building is very high quality. It's actually created a different kind of problem for us, which is a really high class problem. When it comes time to do blending trials, we've got our estate reserve, which is the best of the best that we make. Then we've got Doubleback. Then we've got Bledsoe family Cabernet. And then we've got a catch-all in our family wine. It's everything else. Well, all of a sudden now, the bottom tier is really great. And so blending trials, they really become splitting hairs. Now there still is a clear delineation, in terms of style, between those three wines, where the estate reserve is just a beautifully elegant, just really pretty wine that has great complexity. And, it really is the best of what we can do. But the elevation is our Bledsoe family Cabernet, which is technically our third cab, because of all this amazing fruit that comes in, all gets the same attention. And that's, it's a really cool problem to have, when you go to blending trails.
Tribute to the team. And to give some perspective to that, traditionally wineries would have, a vineyard manager on staff. They might have an assistant or two, depending on the size of the winery. And then on top of that, then you would just hire harvest interns or people that you would pay on an hourly basis to come in and work harvest. And then you feed them, you house them for the harvest, and then they're gone.
Exactly.
What you're doing is you're having a dedicated team year round, paying them like a salaried employee, taking care of them as a family. And like you said, that really changes everything.
It really, truly does. It's, and it's something that feels really good. And then also I think comes through in the bottle, like it actually comes through in the wine, so it's cool when you get to realize that doing the right thing actually really supports your business. It's not just a feel good thing. It's not just, marketing. It's like, no, this actually producing a better product for us also. And so that's just such a huge win to know that you're doing right, but it's actually benefiting your business.
How involved are you in the day-to-day winemaking decisions?
Very little. I learned a lot over the last 18 years, and I tell people now that I've learned enough that if you gave me perfect fruit, I could make you a perfectly average bottle of wine. But stylistically, I'm involved in directionally where we go. My wife and I are involved in blending trials. But when it comes to the actual day-to-day decision making, I trust Josh with that completely. Has
there ever been a moment where you guys disagreed or, came head to head about like, I don't agree with that, or this is not the way I want it?
Yeah, we generally, I would say, we agree on most things. And when we don't, we have a good enough relationship that we're able to talk through things until we come to a mutual agreement. And so we really haven't had moments where we've had a, completely opposite viewpoint of something. We've just, on the business side, there've been some decisions where, we're going one direction and we'll pull back and say, hey, let's rethink this. Let's really think through this. And we do have some great advisors that bring common sense into the equation. We're married to them. But it turns out when we listen to these women in our lives, we generally make better decisions. And then we have
I know that feeling.
And we have this. It's frustrating when they're always right, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's really annoying.
My wife was just on before here trying to tell me about how I should organize the bottles and back. And she was trying to take the Bledsoe one out of the middle. I'm like, no, this is his wine. It needs to go in the middle. And ultimately we figured it out, but she's usually right. It's really freaking annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. So but no, Josh and I, our decision-making process, very respectful of each other. We think through things. And if there's something that we're not sure about, or we have a difference of opinion, we'll generally work through that until we come to a consensus. And then on the stylistic decisions, blending trials, if there's a tiebreaker, again, my wife gets to break the tie, but
Okay.
we're generally, when we've done that, in most instances, we've been able to come to a strong consensus with all of us that it's one of these two, right? It's either this one or this one, and you're usually talking about 1 or 2% difference in terms of what's blended into the bottle, and then Mara gets to break the tie, and and we trust her.
What does Mara like to drink at home?
She we drank a lot of Pinot Noir in the house.
Yeah.
She's
Domestic?
yeah, a lot of domestic Pinot Noir, a lot of stuff from the Willamette Valley. She's from Portland, so it's kind of cool for us. My hometown valley is the Walla Walla Valley, and her hometown valley is the Willamette Valley. So we actually have wineries in both of our hometowns. She's a very kind wine snob. She will tell you that she's not, but I know that she is. And so
Yeah.
I'll open something, and she sort of has levels. Like I'll open something, and if it's an average bottle of wine, she goes, "Perfect, that's great. I won't drink very much." And
Hey, that's not snob. That's a discerning
it
palate.
is right. And she goes, "Oh, this is perfect. I didn't want to drink very much tonight, so thanks for opening this pretty bottle of wine." Uh, and uh, um, and then,
Kind.
and then there are, oh, this is good. That's sort of another level. Like, oh, I like this. Um, then there's the next level, which is, oh, I actually really like that. And then every once in a while I'll open something for her, and she'll like, "Oh my God, what's that?" And unfortunately, she's never said that with an inexpensive bottle of wine. I've tried forever and ever to just like, "Oh yeah, maybe she'll like this $25 bottle I found on that bottle shop," and she's like, "Oh, that's pretty good." And then open some like 25-year-old Barolo that's been in the cellar. She's like, "Oh my God, what's that?" I'm like, "God, yes." So, unfortunately, unfortunately or fortunately, she has a very expensive palate. Um, she doesn't want to be the one that's going to describe the wine or give it language or any of that, but she knows what's good and what's not.
Yeah. Well, that's a good person to have sign off on the last, of the consensus
No,
for the blending trials. I know we're getting at time, so I have a couple of quick questions. One last football question, and then another wine question. So football question first, just because I gotta know. You played for Bill Parcells. He drafted you. For everybody out there, vines, you were talking about, they need to struggle. They need to dig deep into their root system, develop their root system in order to make great fruit. That's what helps them make great fruit. I would say Bill Parcells would think the same thing about quarterbacks, except that he started you year one. Um, can you share something about that or Parcells?
yeah, I just notoriously an absolute pain in the ass. Anybody that tells you it was a pleasure to play for him is lying. I was just recounting a story yesterday. Um, People were asking me about what was it like when you first started the winery. So, well, there's a Parcells quote that actually applies. He told me my rookie year, we're at practice, and he goes, "Bledsoe, you don't even know what you don't know."
Hmm.
Meaning, didn't even know what I was supposed to learn. You and that was the case then, and it certainly was the case when we started the winery. Like I didn't even know what I didn't know. Not only did I not have the knowledge, I didn't know which knowledge I was trying to acquire, right? And so that's the process of like, okay, well, what do I need to know before I can actually even learn it? But yeah, Parcells was a pain in the ass, but he did start me right away, and then my second year we threw the ball more than anybody else in the entire NFL, which I think shocked a lot of people that we were just airing it out. But it was because that's what we had to win.
Was that the 70 attempt game? Was that in your second year?
That was my second year. Yeah,
Yeah.
through it.
Most attempts, most completions in the game. All right. Um, Back to Washington State wine. So a lot of, I would say, secondary wine fans are like, oh, well, what do I know Washington for? Like, oh, it's kind of like alt California. This is their words, not mine. And I think one of the struggles is like you look at Napa Valley and you think Cabernet Sauvignon, right? I mean, that's the calling card. Washington State doesn't necessarily have a calling card. Do you think there should be? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that Cabernet is our thing as well. There is some amazing Syrah that's grown in the Walla Walla Valley as well. But what I tell people is that if you want to find something that combines the best of the old world and the best of the new world, that's Walla Walla. We've got the old world structure. We've got tannin. We've got natural acidity in the wine that presents this beautiful juiciness in the wine. But you don't have to lay these wines down for 30 years before they're drinkable. They're actually pretty good when they're young. Now they do age well. But then you have that structure, but you also have beautiful New World fruit. where some of the and these are stereotypes, of course, but I don't mean to just lump everything into one category. But a lot of the New World stuff, which would be Napa or Australia, that just gets so big. There's so much fruit, so much oak, so much, uh, just over the top, so much alcohol. They're hot, and so those wines can kind of overpower you a little bit. Where the stereotypical old world wine, really austere, really tannic, and they're kind of harsh when they're young. Where I think we kind of find the middle ground between those. And the other thing I tell people, I had one guy tell me this. He was a somm at a restaurant. And he goes, "Well, Washington Cab." He goes, "Yeah, that's what if people are at a table and one wants an Oregon Pinot and one wants a California Cabernet, no, go to Washington. You've got that balance and elegance, that the Pinot drinker is gonna like, but you still have that power that the Cab drinker is gonna like."
I always say Washington State is the wine's world virtual bridge between the old world and the new world. So
Right.
Well said.
It's into the choir, man.
Drew, thank you so much for coming on the Wine Centric show and sharing your stories. I will tell everybody out there, get yourself some Bledsoe family wines, whether it be the Doubleback, that might be, you save up for that one, but it's worth it. And get yourself some Bledsoe family wines, get yourself some Bledsoe McDaniels wines if you like the Pinot Noir, and you will drink deliciously.